If you asked an average Atlas fan how they got into Atlas, I wouldn't be surprised if it came down to 3 games. Even though I've produced a few SMT videos, like you, I didn't get into Atlas through them. I first heard about them in the late 2000s with Persona 4 and heard a ton of praise about Persona 4 Golden, which was stuck on the PS Vita. Several years later, Persona 5 released to critical acclaim, I was bored, bought it, and the rest was history. Not only are Persona 3, 4, and 5 some of the best gateways into Atlas, but they're also just incredible games. And like Persona 3 is to me, they're all special to someone. Persona 4 in particular, however, feels like Atlas's crown jewel. P4 is often lauded as the best modern Persona game. Its memorable story, brilliant cast, hauntingly relatable themes, incredible setting of Inaba, and outstanding soundtrack have been praised since the game was released. The way people remember this game and still enjoy it almost 20 years later is a testament to its quality. And like all of you, Persona 4 holds a special place in my heart. With Persona 4 Revival on the horizon, having discussed Persona 3 already, and being an Atlas fan, I thought it'd be fun to return to Inaba and see how Persona 4 has held up over the years, and yeah, we have a lot to talk about. Before getting into it, here is your spoiler warning. I can already see somebody in the comments writing, why are you giving a spoiler warning to an 18-year-old game? I don't think it's a stretch to call Persona 4 story and cast the best part of the game. Additionally, a brand new generation of Persona 4 fans are about to be born through Revival. If you don't know anything about this game's plot, spoilers are everywhere online and in spin-offs. It's hard to avoid them, but I'd implore you to go into Persona 4 completely blind. So much time has passed since this game was released that I feel like the community forgets that it's a murder mystery. A huge part of the experience is speculating the killer's identity. Watching the story unfold in front of you and meeting the cast are 2 big reasons these games took off. Personally, I'd feel terrible if I robbed somebody of that experience. I have no idea why, but it feels like people don't really care about story spoilers as much as they should. Character deaths, reveals, betrayals, plot twists, and the rest are all written to elicit certain emotions. If you don't have dessert before your dinner, you shouldn't be indulging in spoilers before seeing something. Savor this experience because you only get it once. There's a reason people always fantasize about playing their favorite games blind again. We yearn for this experience, so please don't throw it away. With that lengthy preamble out of the way, sit back, relax, and grab a snack as we discuss Persona 4 because if my outline is anything to go off of, we're gonna be here for a while. Unlike its predecessor Persona 3, Persona 4 has the definitive edition. This might sound stupid, but thank God Atlas learned their lesson by now. The problem with recommending Persona 3 historically is you had to break down the difference between FES and Portable. Each version has its own merits, but I guess Atlas ultimately decided to choose for us. Several years later, Persona 3 Reload would enter the Persona 3 arms race as the definitive edition. I'd love to have an impression on Reload, but I haven't finished it yet even though I'm in the middle of playing it. From what I've seen online, Reload released to positive reviews, but there's a vocal group of critics who believe the game is a gentrified version of Persona 3. Whether or not this is the definitive version of Persona 3, Atlas learned their lesson with the sequel. As such, we'll be discussing Persona 4 Golden in this video. Golden adds new personas, expanded party member abilities, a new social link, more bosses, a dungeon, and even more. I can't reiterate how great it is to say just play Persona 4 Golden, and that's it. You don't have to sit down and explain why there's no definitive version of Persona 3, even though Atlas went through the trouble of remaking it. Speaking of Atlas, Persona 4 entered development shortly after Persona 3 released to universal acclaim. And if you're a younger fan, doesn't this look weird? Yes, back in the day development cycles were much shorter and Atlas was, well, still broke. After years of failing to break into the Western market, Hoshino and the team threw a Hail Mary called Persona 3 and it served as the turning point. Following Persona 3's success in 2006, Persona 4 launched in the summer of 2008 in Japan and the winter of 2008 in North America. Persona 4 was developed in the same engine as Persona 3. The sequel leveraged similar models from the prequel. Similar areas, enemies, persona models, and more are certainly a huge reason why the turnaround was so quick. Looking at this in 2026 is sort of funny. It feels like people were far more tolerant of similar graphics back in the day. This tolerance, or all of us just being kids at the time, contributed to faster development cycles. And don't worry, I'm not an old man who expects developers to have new projects out every 2 or 3 years anymore. Developing games today is far more rigorous than it was 20 years ago, and tastes have changed drastically. That said, I really do wonder if Persona 4 Revival will feature similar assets from Reload like the originals. It'd be a cool little Easter egg that will inevitably lead people to calling it soulless or, something stupid like that. When booting up Persona 4 for the first time, the first thing you'll probably realize is the tonal shift. Where Persona 3 opens with a boy walking and girl struggling to shoot herself, Persona 4 opens with an ad, a news reporter about a murder, and a boy leaving home. The opening informs us that this will be a very different experience. This is further exacerbated through the shift in art direction as well. P3's art direction is meant to be more haunting and unsettling. In the original, there's tons of uncomfortable imagery. It's not always comfortable to look at, but there's an undeniable beauty to it as well. Its tone is more akin to the mainline Shin Megami Tensei series. I covered the tone and atmosphere extensively in my P3 video, so check that out if you're interested. P4, conversely, is far more saturated, at least when we're talking about Golden. The new color palette makes the game feel more upbeat, and the cast is written to be a bit more welcoming. Instead of dealing with trauma or grappling with destiny, most of the cast deals with social pressure and anxiety. Beyond the writing, the shift in tone can be felt through the world as well. The setting of Inaba feels like this homey, small, rural town. You'll find old people walking through the streets, kids playing at the park, and animals just roaming. The rural setting allows Japan's natural beauty to shine through as well. Nature's tranquility elicits a different vibe compared to the metropolitan setting. The hustle and bustle of the city is replaced with a slower and more relaxed setting now. There's a quaintness to Persona 4 that you don't get from 3 or 5. It's a more relaxed and carefree setting, excluding the murder that's on the loose. Describing atmosphere and vibe are notoriously difficult. I'm sure you'll understand since you've probably played the game before clicking on this video. Persona 4's more optimistic atmosphere bleeds into the cutscenes art direction as well. If I had to use a word to describe the new cutscenes, I'd probably say contemporary. They're animated very well, but they look similar to other anime at the time. This isn't a bad thing, and it might have been Hashino's initial vision for its predecessor. It's fun to speculate whether P3's cutscenes were intentionally done or a product of the game's limited budget. P3's cutscenes feel more experimental, relying on haunting visual storytelling. They're better shot, have superior camera work, and are more interesting to watch. Persona 4's cutscenes feel more streamlined by comparison. They serve their purpose, but they're undeniably a step back artistically. At this point, you're probably wondering why I'm spending so much time on the tone, atmosphere, and art direction. Atlus's games have historically bolstered incredible atmospheres. It's been something that they've been moving away from for years though. Some games like SMT4 faithfully preserved Atlus's original tone, which is all but absent in modern titles like Persona 5 and SMT5. Persona 5 I can give some grace to because that's like a, not SMT. I sincerely believe that Persona 4's success was the genesis of this tonal shift. Think about it for a sec. How many people do you know who refused to play Persona 3 because of its tone? They probably saw darker scenes, the blood-filled hallways of Tartarus, and high schoolers shooting themselves in the head. Combine these with P3's identity being rooted in death and existentialism, and you get a group of people who will probably never touch the game. Many of the themes and what the game provides commentary on, people either ignore, lean on religion for comfort, or endeavor to find meaning behind it. Persona 4's story is far more palatable by comparison. It's a story centered around society, the personalities born through it, being comfortable in our own skin, and has one of the genre's most relatable casts. Because these themes are far more relatable, it's no surprise this game took off the way it did. Yes, Persona 4 tackles some mature themes, but the lingering sense of dread is all but absent, especially in Golden, and this shift in tone would ultimately divide the community. While there are people who call this the best Persona game, there's also a group of people who were disappointed as well. I wasn't aware of how divisive this game was until streaming it and reading everyone's thoughts. Ultimately, the shift in tone is a personal preference. Your enjoyment of this game depends on how many Atlus games you've played and what you're looking for in their games. There's no right or wrong answer here, and I see where both sides are coming from, but we also can't ignore the impact P4 had on the series either. One of the difficult realities long-running franchises face is with innovation. Reinventing yourself for a new generation of gamers and appealing to them while sustaining your core audience is incredibly difficult. We also need to accept that innovation is a neutral term. As discussed in my Batman Arkham Origins video, for every Resident Evil 4, there's a Dead Space 3. Both titles are innovative, but one of them is far better received than the other. These are the risks that studios take when reinventing a series. Persona 4 felt like Persona's final step outside of the Mega 10 series, injecting high school slice of life arcs into the main plot with more activities to do would serve as the framework for future Persona titles. This change would catapult the series to new heights. This success spawned several spin-offs, an anime, and the Persona 4 brand reaching far beyond the gaming audience. Instead of complaining about what the game isn't, I think we should embrace it for what it is, which ironically is one of the game's core messages. The final area of the visuals I'll touch on are the graphical downgrades between Persona 4 and Golden. Atlus hasn't addressed this directly, so please consider all of this speculation. Since Persona 4 was originally a PS2 game and Golden was slated for the PS Vita, concessions had to be made for the weaker hardware. Less storage and graphical power forced Atlus to cut some corners with Golden. Certain stages and backgrounds aren't as detailed. The color palette is far brighter, certain attacks look worse, and most famously, the dense hazy fog was practically removed. As you're almost likely aware, there's a mod to replace Golden's fog with the originals, but it's a shame that it wasn't fixed or patched for the console versions. Yes, even though I'm a PC gamer that can technically, and I quote, fix this, I wish the official version of the game got a patch. There are mods to fix Persona 3 Portable, add style switching to Devil May Cry 3, and to uncompressed Nocturne's audio, but mods are not fixes. Please preserve your games properly. Anyways, given Atlus's track record of patching games and the fact Revival is right around the corner, I'm probably just screaming at clouds here. At least it's better than Portable with its awful upscaled backgrounds and terrible audio. And since I mentioned audio, I should probably touch on P4's soundtrack. Okay, listen, we can keep this section short. You know it, I know it, everyone knows it. I don't know if there's anything more to say about this game's soundtrack that hasn't been said over the past almost 20 years. This soundtrack has been on repeat for almost 20 years. It has little to no skips. The arranged tracks are great from the Reincarnation soundtracks. Sega has hosted multiple Persona concerts, and people who haven't played the game have heard these tracks as well. What more do I have to say here? I don't have anything creative to add other than it's just great. Go listen to it. Like, what did you want out of this section? This is easily some of Megaro's finest work, and Chihoko Hirata killed the vocals. If you're just scrolling through YouTube and clicked on this video by chance, which, you know, shout out to you, leave right now, listen to the soundtrack and come back, and you're welcome in advance. Seriously, I can't praise this OST enough, and neither can anyone else. If someone asked what my favorite tracks were, I'd probably just say yes and just keep it moving. Although Persona 3, 4, and 5 are usually praised for their soundtracks, they're beloved for their gameplay as well. Persona's patented calendar system is both overwhelming and a ton of fun your first time around. Rather than reinventing itself, Persona 4 sought to refine the prior entry systems. Quality of life changes is probably the best way to describe Persona 4's gameplay. More social stats were added while the number of social stats levels were reduced. The biggest change by far is that we actually have stuff to do at night now. Persona 3, I love you and all of your flaws, there's nothing to do in the evening about midway through the game. Time is your most valuable asset in these games, so going to sleep in the evening when you have stuff you know you should be doing feels awful. Persona 4 added part-time jobs, books, more night social links, and other ways to stay productive. All these additions make Persona 4 feel more balanced. Then again, we probably needed this extra time since this game is overflowing with content now. If you've played prior Persona games and have a sense of sequencing and planning, you can easily max out all the social links and social stats without a guide in P3. But with Persona 4, it feels like I need to follow a guide if I want to touch everything. Beyond having stuff to do at night, social links probably received the biggest facelift. Instead of every other social link being bad, all of them are pretty well written and fairly engaging this time around. While the entire investigation team has social links fleshing out their characters and resolving their personal arcs, you'll also fall in love with Inabo's supporting cast as well. We'll talk about Nanako and Dojima later, but let's use Ko for example here. The strength social link is tied to which club you choose. Since I chose basketball, I got Ko. After watching practice, Ko approaches, asks how practice went, and welcomes you to the team. On the surface, Ko appears to be a lighthearted person. Him and Daisuke are friends and he loves balls. This social link is pretty low key for the most part. You guys get food, walk around town, hang out, and just high school. Ko invites you and Daisuke to grab dinner until he abruptly cancels because he has something to take care of. During dinner, Daisuke reveals that Ko is part of the Ichijo family. He tells us they're a distinguished family who looks down on basketball. Although they think the sport's barbaric, Ko loves it and Daisuke asks us to support him. One day after practice, Ko reveals how common arranged marriages are in his family for political gain. He makes some lighthearted comments about this, but there's an insecure person behind his smile. As he tells us about the family, he shares that his father is looking for a successor and Ko is unsure whether he wants to bear that responsibility. At this point in the social link, it's difficult to assess whether he wants to carry the family name, but the pain on his face is hard to ignore. Ko begins to question his self-worth and if there's even a reason to try as time passes. Daisuke tries cheering him up by hosting a basketball game. After the game, the three of you find yourselves back on the roof as Ko tells us he's lost in life. He thought he was adopted to carry on the Ichijo name until his stepsister was born, who happens to be a blood relative. With her carrying the family name, he asks himself why he's even there anymore. Ko remembers he was adopted and wants to reach out to the orphanage to see if they knew who his biological parents were. Yu and Daisuke implore him to follow his heart as he begins searching for his parents. After visiting the orphanage and returning to Inaba, Ko comes back with a letter from the person who left him at the orphanage. The letter describes how Ko's parents were both sick and couldn't raise him. They love him, continue to watch over him, and want him to accomplish whatever he desires. Feeling lonely, he thanks both of you for having his back. Eventually, Ko re-examines the letter and concludes it was written recently despite the fact the orphanage said they've been holding on to it for over a decade. Instead of being destroyed by this, Ko's grateful that there's such kind and warm people out there. He tells you how grateful he is of your friendship by acknowledging the bond that you've built together. Ko's story is a narrative about purpose, expression, and belonging. He grew up believing his life was preordained. Being an Ichijo means you're from a distinguished family. Your partner will be selected for you, and you'll have financial and political power in the future. He was bred for this lifestyle until his stepsister was born. After his parents shifted focus towards his stepsister, Ko was able to do whatever he wanted. Whether he wanted to admit it or not, he found solace in his parents' expectations. Following their rules provided his life with meaning, purpose, and something he yearned for above all: community. While community, belonging, and acceptance are core themes of Persona 4, that's not why I'm talking about the strength social link. The depth and quality of this social link can be found throughout the rest of them. The detective team's social links are focused on dealing with the ramifications of main story events, confronting their demons, and learning to accept themselves. Unlike its predecessor, where the writing quality is a coin toss, almost all the characters are genuinely engaging now. I found myself invested in random civilians' lives. In addition to the vastly improved writing, they functionally changed as well. Social links can increase your social stats now and unlock combat abilities as you progress through the detective team's social links, which are certainly something. I know the social stats increase from social links are marginal, but anything helps with how hard 100%ing this game is without a guide. The big reason I struggle to replay through Persona games are because of social links and social stats. Both of these and the calendar system are fun the first couple of times, but you'll inevitably learn how to min-max, balance which personas you have, plan several months ahead, follow a guide for the optimal social link responses, and so on. However, this is a personal problem at the end of the day. As a matter of fact, I don't know if this is a valid complaint since, well, that's Persona. I guess New Game Plus addresses this, but then you cruise through the dungeon crawling and combat, which you don't really need New Game Plus for. So let's just rip the band-aid off. Persona 4's dungeons are in contention for the worst part of the game. These dungeons fail on an individual level and within the broader scope of Atlus's illustrious library. Other than the music and narrative implications, they really don't have much going for them. All the dungeons are fairly rudimentary, featuring a teleportation puzzle or some form of backtracking. Defeated enemies drop items you can sell to unlock equipment, and P3's fatigue system has been removed. And that's really it. If you haven't played many dungeon crawlers or are new to the franchise, P4's dungeons are probably going to be serviceable for you. As I said earlier, your enjoyment of these dungeons erodes if you've played P3 or other SMT games. Regardless of your feelings on Tartarus, it undeniably had more going for it than any of P4's dungeons. Each floor of Tartarus is stuffed with dynamic elements. Whether you're chasing gold hands, stumbling upon chest floors, going into Tartarus when it's unstable, randomly getting more experience, doing Elizabeth's request, sending party members to find chests/defeat enemies, or finding valuable items that sell for a lot, Tartarus is more dynamic than anything P4 provides. The absence of this dynamism contributes to P4's dungeon crawling feeling bland. Of all the changes made with P4, I miss Guardian bosses the most. It makes sense why they were removed since P4's dungeons are like 10 floors, but this alludes to a much grander issue P4 faces. The biggest problem I have with Persona 4 is its combat's direction's removal of friction. The Guardian bosses were designed to be challenging and force players to use game mechanics to beat them. Since this is an RPG, there's a myriad of approaches to team composition, items, and other synergies that you can use to overcome each boss, and this friction used to expand beyond just the combat. Tartarus felt like a living, breathing place. Outside of checkpoints, no two runbacks to them or a gate ever felt the same. You may enter looking to progress Tartarus until you're trapped in a dark room and separated from your party members. You may stumble upon a chest floor with the Reaper stalking you or something else entirely. This variety forced players to plan for several scenarios, not so different from Capcom's Resident Evil series. P3's dungeon crawling is certainly more rigorous and demanding, but it's also far more rewarding as well. Yes, dying and losing all your progress sucks, but that's what makes dungeon crawling. The high-stakes dungeon crawling in parallel with the more demanding gameplay loop makes the gameplay more rewarding. Friction introduced with interesting gameplay mechanics provides players with a deeper sense of reward. Introducing friction within an RPG especially drastically improves your game. With that said, Tartarus and P3's game designs aren't for everyone either. It's an admittedly dated game design that won't resonate with everyone. Whether any of this bothers you depends on what you're looking for in a Persona game. As someone who prefers the mainline SMT games, you can probably tell where my preferences lie. Most people play these games for the story, but more on that in a second. If you didn't feel the shift in the game design from the dungeons, you'll almost certainly feel it in Persona 4's combat. Persona 4's combat feels like an overcorrection to the prior system. If you've played Persona 5, Reload, or any SMT title, you'll feel right at home here. Demon Fusion, the Compendium, Elemental Weaknesses, One More system, and the rest are here. Persona leverages the One More system where striking an enemy's weakness provides an additional turn. Persona 3 Fest stuck out like a sore thumb because it leveraged tactics on top of the One More system. P4 still has tactics, but there's absolutely no reason to use them. Unlike Fez's competent direction following AI, P4's AI is terrible. There were several times where I set the party members to conserve MP, only for them to use magic anyways. Tactics in this game functionally do not work. I have no idea what happened between titles, man. Atlus also removed several commands, so all those unique strategies I used to make are just gone now entirely. Nevertheless, tactics in a post-direct command world feels like more of a novelty than anything at all. Direct commands are a straight improvement from tactics, and there's a reason Atlus hasn't returned to them since and has removed them entirely from P4 Revival. Direct commands provide more depth to combat and prevent the tactics sequencing issue that I discussed in my P3 video. If you haven't seen my P3 video, which you should if you're interested, P3 forces players to commit to a strategy until it's the main character's turn again. This can be troublesome since you can't change strategies immediately in this game. Direct commands remove the sequencing issue and allow players to change their strategies whenever. This results in direct commands being far more dynamic and intuitive to use than tactics. Hashino and the team weren't satisfied with this simple addition. No, social link abilities were added with direct commands, and they sure are something. Persona 4 famously added a plethora of abilities for party members to unlock through their social links. Follow-up attacks, defending the main character from mortal blows, withstanding a deadly attack, team attacks like Kanji and Naoto's, and much more were added. Golden doubled down by rebalancing the cast and adding even more social link abilities. Randomly sharing an enemy's resistance, all-out attack buffs, random stat buffs, and more started the trend of your navigator being one of your strongest party members. And all these changes are a ton of fun, at least on the surface. Players will undeniably feel strong with all that they can do now. Regardless of the difficulty, you'll be cruising through this game after a few dungeons, and herein lies the problem. Everyone says these games are too easy, and Persona 4 Golden was the progenitor of this issue. The biggest crime Persona 4 commits is the shift in combat philosophy. During combat, you'll randomly get free follow-up attacks now. Chie can randomly one-shot enemies. You'll receive random buffs. Rise will occasionally protect you from attacks, and the list goes on and on. It'd be different if these were commander skills that were on a timer or cost some resource. Instead, you could be losing a fight, get a random luster candy, have an attack nullified, and the tides will turn. All these ancillary buffs makes combat feel incredibly shallow to me. Now, in defense of P4's combat, these abilities aren't just given to you. You need to level up social links to get these, but social links and stats are the first things experienced players will level up if you know what you're doing. If you're new to the series and have no idea what you're doing, you might even struggle like I did when I first played P5 back in 2016. Furthermore, most people play these games for the story. I don't think it's crazy to say that most people would prefer to spend their time with the cast than dungeon crawling. I'd wager most people complete these social links regardless of the combat enhancements though. Sure, you technically have to unlock these abilities, but it's really not that hard unless this is your first Persona game. And if you still find yourself struggling, don't worry, Persona 4 has your back with Shuffle Time. Shuffle Time functions similarly to how it does in Persona 3. Occasionally after battles, you can select a tarot card with different abilities. Additional experience, health, extra money, and more of what you'd expect are what you'd find here. However, it wouldn't be Persona 4 systems if it made sense, right? Despite all the cards being strong, two cards take priority over all the others: skill cards and the Magician Tarot card. Skill cards do what you'd expect, they just give you skills. Skills can be taught to any Persona with no limitations. Skill cards are especially strong in Persona 4 Golden as the skill card pool was largely increased and you can purchase and duplicate them in Golden. Skill cards have been problematic since Persona 3 Portable. If you'd like a deep dive on why skill cards are nearly impossible to balance, Bubble Tea has an excellent video discussing this issue. The Magician Tarot card is actually pretty funny though. This card levels up one of your skills, and I don't think I have to explain why late game moves like Null or Repel Physical in the early game or God Hand is an issue. Speaking of physical attacks, Pierce, Strike, and Slash were all replaced with a single physical stat. This one change removed a ton of nuance from party members, enemies, and the entire combat system. Rather than choosing a party member specializing in one of the 3 physical attacks, you just add Kanji because he's Kanji. This change makes enemies more boring to fight since they only have one physical attack. Atlus's impetus behind this change was to make combat more accessible, and seeing what this game did for the franchise, mission accomplished. Ultimately, the only people who will notice this, or frankly even care about these issues, are the minority of people who care about Persona's gameplay. Where mainline SMT games and P3 established stress through dungeon crawling and parity between player and enemy actions, Persona 4 tips the scale entirely in the player's favor. In Nocturne, you and the enemies follow the same rules. Whoever strikes a weakness uses half their turn, and whoever gets their spell reflected or absorbed loses all their turns. And P3 follows a similar design philosophy. Atlus games, P3 and prior had this sense of push and pull, making combat feel meaningful. Each encounter that you won just felt special. In Nocturne, for example, players can do certain moves that trigger a skill called Beast Eye, a move providing an enemy with several press turns. Players can't get this skill, but we can also pass turns and sometimes avoid triggering Beast Eye entirely. Beast Eye functions as a checks and balance to ensure combat had some form of parity. You can still cheese the AI, Bright and Dark Might are absolutely crazy, and there's still a chance for Mott to be Mott, but the combat design philosophy behind Nocturne was far more deliberate. SMT5 features this parity in its combat design since bosses and common enemies have access to a Magatoki critical. Shit, even SMT4 with the abomination known as Smirk was still more fun to interact with than Persona 4's combat, even though it feels like we're just rolling the slots. It's truly the highest of highs and lowest of lows. Albeit incredibly volatile, SMT4's combat is still more fun to interact with than any of Persona's combat. Balancing the playing field is what makes combat in these games so rewarding. There's a sense of accomplishment to surviving combat encounters in Mega 10 that's just missing from P4. Bringing this back to what I said earlier, your enjoyment of the dungeons and combat is contingent upon how much Mega 10 you've played, or if you even care about the gameplay of Persona. To many Persona fans, the combat is the means to an end. If you haven't played Persona 3 Portable, Reload, Royal, or any of the mainline SMT games, you'll be enamored with the system. That was me after playing Persona 5 for the first time. I didn't think turn-based combat could get much better than that, until I thought about it, but that about sums up the problems with Persona 5, right? I'll save those thoughts for another video though. To reiterate, there's a sizable chunk of the Persona fanbase that doesn't care about the gameplay. Persona's gameplay means a lot to me, and I don't think it should be divorced from the conversation from these games either. Mechanics are what provide video games with their identity. Ignoring these means ignoring the medium itself. I don't care if you're playing a fighting game, survival horror, shooter, an RPG, or even a visual novel. You must interact with the medium to progress. RPGs in particular are easy to figure out since they're governed by systems. Persona 4 comparatively has nothing to figure out other than hanging out with your friends. Maxing out their social links is the biggest mechanical bottleneck. Listen, I'm not trying to sound like I'm gatekeeping, and Atlus doesn't need to make their games as hard as the mainline SMT series. And I know I've played and covered a lot of Atlus's games on my channel, but you have a difficulty problem when challenge runs or returning to the original is mandatory for any meaningful friction. Persona 4, Golden especially, felt like Atlus was scared to implement friction, and honestly, I think that's really concerning. Atlus has done a mostly exceptional job implementing friction and difficulty throughout their games historically. RPG difficulty is uniquely challenging since this usually translates to dealing less and receiving more damage. Atlus has consistently made some of the best super bosses and introduced some unique hurdles in their games. Matador is one of the many exemplary examples of this. Unlike other RPGs, changing your strategy, approach, and team can make or break a challenging battle, and robbing players from the catharsis of beating one of these bosses is really unfortunate. One of the best ways to showcase your system is by watching players beat your bosses in a plethora of ways. Creating unique solutions for bosses is one of the reasons I fell in love with Atlus's games and am spending this much time discussing friction, and it's hard to meaningfully interact with the systems when the game just plays itself. Removing some of the social link abilities, putting Rise on a timer, reducing the frequency of them, allowing enemies to do all-out attacks, and or providing players more control over these actions instead of them constantly happening would drastically improve P4's combat. And despite all these criticisms, Persona 4 played a pivotal role in growing the franchise. Persona 4 was a huge success, but have you ever noticed whenever somebody's talking about P4, they're usually just talking about the story and cast? Well, there's a good reason why. Before talking about the story, let's address the low-hanging fruit and what receives the most complaints. The opening. You know what's funny about this? I've had this outline done for so long that my old opening thoughts are here. This is funny since I made a video called Can We Fix Atlas's Biggest Problem, where I debunk everything I'd written, so we'll go off the dome with this one. For context, if you haven't seen the video, I visit one of Atlas's most criticized areas, their openings. I highly suggest watching this video if you're curious about writing and or why the community usually complains about Atlas's openings. Long story short, I went into the video ready to tear one of their openings apart. I wanted to go over one of their latest releases, so I went over Metaphor Repantasio's opening hours. Metaphor, like Persona 4, has been criticized for its lengthy opening, so I thought why not go through it and see what could be removed. The main takeaways from this thought experiment were, sure, there was some excessive exposition, and Atlas has the tendency to recap events that occurred a few hours ago, which I call JRPG-itis, but I wouldn't have changed much for the most part, which brings me to Persona 4. Listen, I don't need to go through the same experience to tell you Persona 4 opening is long. Nevertheless, I unironically am willing to give Persona 4 some grace here. In this video's original outline and before writing the opening video, P4 was the poster boy for bad Atlas openings. This opening has been criticized since 2008. Hell, you can argue it's one of the most iconic parts of the game. The main reason everyone complains about P4's opening is because it takes around 3 hours for the training wheels to come off. I don't care how great the writing, characters, Inaba, and soundtrack are. A 3-hour opening with gameplay sprinkled in is unacceptable. Although I can't blame anyone for feeling this way, I think it's easy to forget how experimental Persona 4 was for Atlas and Megaten as a whole. If you were a Megaten fan before P4, you've traversed apocalyptic Tokyo, tackled a narrative about death, have existed somewhere in between, and much more. P4 was a drastic departure from these settings and approach to storytelling. Unlike other Megaten titles where characters were distant, the settings were oppressive, and silence was common, P4 went with the opposite approach. P4 is willing to slowly immerse players in Inaba, establish a murder mystery through contemporary storytelling, introduce its large cast of characters, and ease players into the drama. Instead of the world feeling like a living character, having larger than life stakes, or battling over alignments, the mystery and character drama takes center stage. And while this sounds like every other game, this was a major shift for Atlas and helped Persona stand out amongst the other Megaten spin-offs. This shift in narrative direction is why P4's opening is P4's opening. The excessive exposition and dialogue are a byproduct of this transition. Hashino, Tanaka, and the rest of the writers were still learning how to properly balance the story with gameplay. They learned their lessons since Atlas, noticeably, hasn't written another 3-hour opening since. And if you think Metaphor's opening is 3 hours, Metaphor's opening is a hell of a lot better than Persona 4's in my humble opinion. For these reasons and the crippling reality that this opening is worth enduring, I see Persona 4's opening hours as a necessary step towards carving modern Persona's identity. Whenever we hear the term experimental, an air of negativity accompanies it. Experimental usually means at odds with contemporary. Crafting a more contemporary story within Megaten's framework was a gamble no matter how you look at it. A more focused and engaging plot with interesting drama and characters on this scale was a huge departure for the series. And while the opening could have used more show don't tell or got players into the gameplay faster, the overall pacing and writing are exceptional. I understand how paradoxically stupid it sounds to praise the pacing after the opening, but the moment-to-moment story and gameplay are a huge improvement over its predecessor. The overall writing feels more focused and consistent this time around. Gone are the days you're waiting on the full moon or July for something to happen. After the opening's done, you'll be engaged in a more traditionally told story. Yes, it's an oxymoron to describe a game where people get thrown into TVs and use their true selves to fight shadows as traditional, but that's what we're going with. As a result, P4 feels more relatable than other Megaten stories. This was achieved through writing a compelling murder mystery, providing an adequate amount of time between dungeons, and creating one of JRPG's best casts. I don't think I need to spend a ton of time explaining why murder mysteries are engaging, so we'll make this quick. Searching for clues, hints, listening closely to the story, developing a relationship with the cast, and doing mental gymnastics as you search for the culprit is fun. If done properly, you'll be on the edge of your seat for the entire game. The anticipation of the next murder and searching for answers is usually enough to keep people hooked. Creating an engaging murder mystery is a ton of work, but the writers went one step further by integrating one of the game's core themes into it. We'll tackle these themes later, but this game's story and writing are remarkable. I don't think they're perfect by any means, and there's definitely a tonal problem with people getting murdered and then the team walking into them just having like a pageant show or just hanging out during the summer. I don't think that the story and writing are perfect, but you can certainly make the argument that they are. and that's perfectly fine. Certain scenes, as you'd expect, suffer from JRPG-itis, have bloated dialogue, recent events are sometimes recapped, and some gags go on for too long. However, if you're someone who loves the cast, which you probably do, it's easy to overlook these minor blemishes and the, tonal juxtaposition that Persona 4 is famous for. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, think along the lines of somebody just got murdered, team locked in, and then next thing you know, you guys are going to the beach, just having a good time making jokes. It's really funny. In addition to this tonal shift, the cast is so well written this time around that it inadvertently fixed Persona 3's downtime problem. Downtime in game design describes what occurs between major events. The term downtime probably sounds negative, but it can be really effective when employed properly. Downtime is a moment for players to collect their thoughts after story events, a chance to experiment with the core gameplay loop, and makes players feel like an actor in the game system. In 2015, Philip Wilkren published an article on Game Developer called Downtime vs. Dead Time in Sequential Games. This is a great read in general if you're curious about game design. Even though this article pertains to sequential games, I think we can apply much of its framework to Persona 4's game design. Philip opens his article by declaring downtime is too general and separates it into 3 buckets: plan time, dead time, and rest time. Dead time occurs when players can't do anything. Moments like waiting for an enemy to attack is an example. Plan time is self-explanatory, and rest time is the glue between plan and dead time. Think of these as cutscenes. You usually set them to auto-progress, grab a stack, or skip them outright. P3's downtime problem rears its ugly head through the laborious nature of its game design. If completing social links and stats can be seen as plan time and rest time are cutscenes, we have an issue. P3, as much as I love you, finds players waiting until the full moon for something interesting to happen. Completing social links and stats are fun and a bit overwhelming your first time, but it becomes monotonous, something you plan, do, and ultimately forget. And the cutscenes before July are so sparse that you'll either get bored or find yourself pushing through. In defense of Persona 3, this was Hoshino and the team's first attempt at the calendar system, and they did an exquisite job overhauling the system following player feedback. Where the team drastically improved this with Persona 4 is the surplus of rest time and the characters. Instead of just doing social stats, links, and dungeon crawling to pass the time, the story and characters meaningfully progress between the dungeons now. After saving Yukiko and updating her on the situation, we hang out with Nanako, get to see more of Inaba, and spend time with our friends until investigating starts again. You still have time to level up your social links, you still have time to fight, and you can level up your social stats as well. I know this sounds incredibly basic and something that's in every JRPG, but I can't understate just how much this helps with the pacing. Players are enveloped in the story with how well it's told this time around. Something's always happening, or we're constantly learning more about Inaba and the cast. Between the mystery, drama, and learning about the detective team, things just feel so much more natural. Aside from the opening hours, I never felt the need to will myself through the story. Things don't stop once they're moving, and there's now a sense of progression with each passing day. I don't think Tanaka, Hoshino, and the Atlus team get enough credit for how much they drastically improved this game's pacing. It's night and day between titles, and aside from the characters and themes, the best thing Persona 4 has going for it. Nevertheless, it's hard to discuss writing, story, pacing, and themes without bringing up the cast. Since the beginning of this video, I've praised P4's cast. It's been hard to not talk about them, and they're probably the most popular part of this game. Shit, even calling Persona 4's cast universally beloved feels like I'm underselling them. P4's cast and the themes accompanying them are at the core of the game. If you don't find the cast compelling, enjoy spending time with them, or fail to relate or understand them, the entire game just falls apart. I don't think it'd be a stretch to say the detective team is the most important part of Persona 4. And yeah, I know that sounds crazy given how much I complained about the gameplay. Persona 4's story is designed to get players more intimate with the cast. The subject matter's nature is more personal and reflective this time around. Characters showing parts of themselves on TV, exploring their psyche through their dungeons, and coming to terms with themselves occurs as you search for the killer are what I mean. Learning about someone's insecurities and watching how they overcome them, especially in a high school setting, hits really close to home. And when the plot is explicitly focused on developing the cast, you'll be hanging out in Inaba with your friends. Inaba gets a special mention for being, well, boring here. The loud, bustling metropolis has been replaced with the boonies. The sounds of people crossing the street, loud music, and car horns have been replaced with cicadas, kids playing outside, and the sound of the water. Outside of a few roads with shops, a shrine, a school, Junes, and a beach, there really isn't much going on here. Inaba is meant to be a quiet, boring setting, but that's what makes it brilliant. The dry, mundane nature of the town is your blank canvas. In the rare moments where you find yourself bored today, it's up to you to make things fun. Reading books, using your imagination, picking up hobbies, or playing games is a great way to pass time. However, the tried and true way of passing time when you have nothing going on is kicking it with your friends. Whether you're playing a bad game, watching a bad movie, eating some awful food, or find yourself somewhere you don't want to be, doing things with your friends is always just better. There's a reason why the term friend slop exists. Unless you're trying to read or get stuff done, goofing around with your friends and lighting up the mood always makes things better. There's just something enchanting about sharing experiences with others you care about. Like, even going through the mundane stuff with your friends is fun, and Persona 4 understands this better than maybe any game I've played. Being Hashino's second Persona game and wanting it to be brighter, the writers actually gave you a family this time around with Nanako and Ryotaro Dojima. Nanako feels like the guiding light throughout the story. After her mother's tragic passing, Ryotaro enshrouds himself with work to ease the pain and stops making time for Nanako. She realizes this and starts picking up chores around the house. These chores and growing up borderline isolated forced her to grow up fast. She still has her childlike nature to her, but the idea of a 6-year-old waking you up, preparing breakfast, cleaning, gardening, looking after the main character, and being worried about dinner is really concerning. She also gets her own socialing, tackling a plethora of difficult topics. Miscommunication, her mother's passing, the role of family, why there's evil in the world, and whether her father still loves her are some of the questions she asks you. She's leaning on you, no pun intended, to understand the world and her emotion. Nanako appears throughout the entire story and helps the main cast tackle their insecurities as well. Her innocent honesty provides everyone with a sense of comfort. With Chie, for example, Nanako helps ground her fear of bugs. Chie is terrified when a grasshopper jumps on her. Nanako removes it, calls them cute, and feels uneasy that Yukiko, Nanako, and everyone else is good with bugs except for her. Nanako then laughs it off, saying plenty of people don't like bugs and there's nothing wrong with that. Although a juvenile moment, life lessons like these tend to stick with us. Chie at this moment learned that everyone has their own fears and insecurities they're dealing with. Just because everyone you know doesn't have a fear of grasshoppers doesn't mean everyone isn't scared of them. She also learned the importance of courage and standing up to your fears too. Moments like these throughout the story and watching her help everyone in ways she doesn't understand shows how kind she is. Nanako feels like the glue keeping everything together, which is a crazy thing to say out of a 6-year-old. Spending time with her and seeing her meet the detective team are a huge reason why everyone, if you have a heart at least, takes November's dungeon so personally. Yet she is far from the only one fighting in the Dojima household. Speaking with Dojima initially feels incredibly awkward. If his relationship with Nanako and ours is anything to go off of, he doesn't remember how to be emotionally present. The weight of being a single father, providing for everyone, and dealing with the loss of his wife is still weighing on his conscience. The lines between who he is and his work persona are incredibly blurred. He apologizes for turning a few questions about school into an interrogation when he just wants to know what you're up to and how you're settling in Inaba. And just so we're clear, because I don't want to get any comments about this, Ryotaro is an incredible father. He apologizes for his mistakes, he tries his best, and deeply cares about you and Nanako despite everything he's going through. Something that separates good from great parents is shielding your kids from hardships. Misery loves company, and positive and negative emotions are infectious. I'm not a parent and I understand it's hard, but a lot of parents take their stress out on their kids. Trauma is usually cyclical and reveals itself to others over time. Regardless of what Ryotaro is going through, he does his best to protect you and Nanako from it. Due to this and the fact Nanako's mom mostly raised her, there's a lot of distance between Nanako and Ryotaro. He's ashamed of himself and even says he's not fit to be her family before Yu cheers him up. Helping Nanako understand the world and seeing Dojima come back to reality as their bond grows is genuinely moving. It's a beautiful and heartwarming story that could have been the center of any other game. If you don't enjoy these two or fail to build a relationship with them, it's clearly a personal problem. The best way to describe P4's entire cast is human. Rather than writing them as perfect people or caricatures, everyone is allowed to be flawed. They're fighting their own battles, they have their own secrets they don't want to share, and are coming to grips with their insecurities. These characters also have a ton of synergy with each other. Tanaka and the team understood this and wrote a ton of social events throughout the story. Whether you're making curry, going to the beach, leaving town for your class trip, preparing for a concert, or snowboarding, we spend so much time with everybody. And like a real relationship, there's good times, bad times, times to comfort each other, and times where you'll be butting heads. Comfort, friction, support, and open conversations are pillars of long-lasting friendships, and Persona 4's cast has this in spades. Realistically, I could probably get away with calling the cast great and moving on, but this is the best opportunity I'll have to talk about them, so we better get started. The original 4 characters consist of Yosuke, Chie, and Yukiko. Yosuke, like Yu, is from Tokyo. Yosuke is an important character because he's one of the first people you meet, practically serves as the leader until Naoto arrives, and is closely tied to Inaba through Junes and his family. The Hanamuda family is probably the closest thing to a prolific family in Inaba, as they own Junes. Junes is important for a wide variety of reasons. It's the primary hangout spot, a place to do social links, and where the detective team enters the TV world. Yosuke is a bright, cheery kid on the surface. He hangs out with Chie and Yukiko, helps out at Junes, goes to school, and just lives his life. He's occasionally bullied because his father owns Junes. This can be seen through his social link with how civilians talk about him and the 2 lazy employees who don't want to work because they know Yosuke. And I think this aspect of his character is grossly underrated. Yosuke's relationships and perspective on Inaba are largely influenced by his father's presence. His father is the reason they moved from Tokyo to Inaba, and his father is why people give him shit. Like any supercenter, Junes is a one-stop shop with better prices than local stores. This would result in local businesses suffering as Junes eclipsed them in sales. Many of us have an inherent bias whenever we hear the word business. Our minds usually default to massive corporations or enterprise-wide companies. With the exception of Junes, many of P4's businesses are ran by local families like the Konishis, Kujikawas, and the Tatsumis, to name a few. The Konishi family ran Inaba's local liquor store for multiple generations. Like many businesses, they began to struggle when Junes opened for business. Saki Konishi is one of your senior classmates and obviously one of the Konishis. As her family struggled, she started working a part-time job at Junes just to help out her family, which ultimately fostered a ton of tension. When entering Konishi liquor in the TV world, we hear how much it bothers Saki's father, the frustration in his voice, how neighbors are gossiping, and see how this impacts Yosuke. Saki's true feelings about Yosuke and how she blames him and his family for tearing hers apart erodes Yosuke's facade until his shadow appears. His shadow confronts him about Junes, the murders, the TV world, and how he carries himself. As an aside, I love listening to the cast confront their shadows. The writing and voice acting perfectly capture the psychological horror of listening to your darkest fears personified. No matter how transparent you are, we all have parts of ourselves that we can't stand or thoughts we don't want to share. Getting back to Yosuke, his shadow reveals his true nature. He was bored out of his mind in Inaba, and the murders, Saki's death, and the TV world finally gave him something to do. These facets of his character are explored throughout the story and a bit in his social link, but I think the most underrated part of him is how much trauma his family name brings. Being born to the Hanamuda family probably comes with the expectation of running Junes amongst other corporate things. The weight of running what's probably the biggest store in the region is a lot for a high school student, but Yosuke is also just lonely. Neighbors and people around him are clearly envious and ostracize him as a result. I don't want to project here and act like Yosuke is this deranged monster with hatred towards the world, but I think his character is much more interesting than we give him credit for. Through simply existing, people are envious of him. They want his life and try to use him. Realistically, he should probably be an arrogant asshole, yet he's lonely and probably doesn't have a ton of friends because they're either back in Tokyo or he's just tired of people using him. The entire cast is easy to resonate with, and I think Yosuke is sometimes left out of this conversation for some reason. Sure, most of us probably can't empathize with his character, but I think we can all sympathize with being judged prematurely. To many, he's a stepping stone, a way to the top, or the boss's son you have to please when he's actually his own person with his own dreams and aspirations. Then again, I believe most of the community neglects this side of his character because he's usually goofing around with you, Chie, or somebody else. The big thing that separates Yosuke and Chie from the rest of the cast is that they don't have their own dungeons. Dungeons serve as an opportunity to learn more about the character. We get to learn about their insecurities, why their shadows took form, and why they are the way they are. Since Yosuke and Chie don't have their own dungeons, they don't have as much characterization as the rest of the cast. And just so we're clear, lack of characterization and poorly written are mutually exclusive here. I'm not saying they're bad characters because they don't have dungeons. I am saying that characters with dungeons receive a bit more development than these two. Anyways, Chie is best described as what you see is what you get. Steak, kung fu, and her relationship with Yukiko is really all you need to know about her. Her and Yukiko have been lifelong friends, and Chie's always been there to protect her. Chie's shadow reveals that their relationship is a bit more complicated as she's jealous of Yukiko and has a bit of a superiority complex. Her envy is rooted in her skin, hair, looks, and how frequently guys approach her, but she also feels superior to Yukiko because of how much she relies on Chie. Furthermore, her envy and superiority are on full display with her boss's design. Shadow Chie is sitting on top of students with chains, a whip, and what appears to be Yukiko's hair. It's a beautifully straightforward yet horrific design fitting of Chie's worst traits. Other than confronting her shadow, Chie really doesn't have much going on. Her social link mostly finds you training, eating, talking about Yukiko, or the whole bully arc that she goes through. She's mostly comedic relief, and that's perfectly fine. She's just a good person who's trying their best and learning to be comfortable in their own skin, which is something most of us need to hear as adults. Her fixations on steak and meat are also, genuinely hilarious. You'll help save her elementary school friend Takeshi and talk about steak in the next social link. Why would we talk about bullying and extortion when we can talk about meat? There really isn't much to say about Chie other than she's relatable, funny, and represents everything Persona 4 is trying to preach. Yukiko, by comparison, has a bit more going on. Sort of similar to Yosuke, Yukiko comes from an important family in Inaba. The Amagi family is very traditional and happens to own the Amagi Inn. When she's not hanging out with Chie, she's preparing to inherit the Amagi Inn as multiple generations have before her. Yukiko's childlike nature is front and center through her appearance on the TV and her dungeon. Her shadow is dressed like a princess who's waiting to be rescued by her Prince Charming as she runs into the castle. Throughout Yukiko's castle, her shadow reinforces how much she desperately wants to be saved and enjoys being the center of attention. Confronting her shadow also reveals how Yukiko feels about her relationship with Chie and how exhausted she is from all the expectations she was born with. Manager training, school, and inheriting the inn make her incredibly anxious, almost like a bird in a cage. Kids, whether they're in primary, elementary, or high school, have an optimistic outlook on the world. They want to become the president, an astronaut, an influencer, unfortunately, a professional athlete, or something else that's difficult to become. It's not that they can't do it, but some of these dreams can be difficult to accomplish based on the cards you were dealt. Fast forward a few years to when you're an adult and this optimism begins to fade. Coming to terms with reality can be defeating. Maturity is followed with pragmatic thoughts, and these thoughts are inherently antithetical to dreams and aspirations. And Yukiko was faced with this in her second year of high school. She's a character who's grounded in family traditions and expectations. She believes her life has been preordained up to this point and hasn't felt any personal fulfillment. She's been miserably going through the motions for most of her life. Her personal interests come second to her family's demands, and it's tearing her up on the inside. I've always loved how Persona 4 tackles family expectations from different angles. Yosuke and Yukiko have a lot more in common than they probably realize. They both come from prolific families that own a lot and they're supposed to inherit them one day. Where Yosuke acknowledges this, doesn't really care, and feels lonely because of the ownership of Junes, Yukiko fell in line with her family. Her social link demonstrates how she comes to accept the Amagi Inn on her own terms. But most people in those positions don't have the confidence or support to refuse family expectations. I just think it's really fascinating how the writers went about discussing the broader social impacts of family expectations. It's impressive how ambitious and ahead of its time Persona 4 was for tackling these social issues. Instead of making a joke or scratching the surface, which, let's be real, Atlus has done in the past, P4 explores a range of social topics with a level of nuance many would shy away from. You already know who I'm alluding to here, so let's just rip the band-aid off and talk about one of my favorite characters, Kanji. Daru kugi wa utareru is a famous Japanese proverb. It roughly translates to "the nail that sticks out must be hammered down." Many believe this quote is infamous, but I think it's an excellent way to engage with Japanese culture. The impetus behind this proverb is to explain the importance of assimilation in Japanese culture. In case you're unaware, many Western countries' cultural beliefs and norms are rooted in individualism. Owning our own homes, having our own money, choosing our own religion, ensuring the well-being of our families, and prioritizing autonomy are values we subscribe to here. Nevertheless, there are very few moral absolutes in the world, and individualism, like collectivism, is far from perfect. Collectivism, conversely, stresses the importance of societal welfare. It functions alongside the altruistic doctrine of our moral obligations to others. Both ethical dogmas have their own pros and cons, but understanding how dynamics like Japanese collectivism, culture, and identity shape society are paramount when discussing Persona 4 and especially Kanji. And for anyone curious about Japanese collectivism and culture, I implore you to check out my Silent Hill video where I deconstruct these Japanese concepts in more depth. Anyways, all this context is critical to understanding Kanji, as he's arguably the most affected by this culture. The best way to describe him is as an outcast who doesn't know how to deal with his emotions. Because of his interests in sewing and painting, he's been ostracized by society. Kanji hasn't been in an environment where he could ever really express himself. This resulted in societal judgment, trouble with the law, piercings, tattoos, wearing a bullet around his neck, and detachment from society. As you'd expect, these problems all started at home. Many of Kanji's interests were formed by his childhood. His family runs a textile shop and seems kind of out there when he describes it. It shouldn't come as a surprise that he has an interest in fabrics, sewing, and probably fashion as well. It's like being surprised that a lawyer's son or daughter becomes a lawyer. It's all that they know. He also preferred to play house instead of attending classes like PE and struggled to make friends as a result. Nevertheless, the loss of Kanji's father is what sent him down this path. One of the last things his father told him was that a real man is strong. This saying, and yeah, I'm paraphrasing, confused Kanji, causing him to dye his hair, get piercings, and get involved with the biker gangs. All these thoughts, with no outlet, coalesce to form Kanji's worldview. The commentary on gender roles and challenging societal norms are clearly present here. Discussions like these, or speculation on Kanji's sexuality, are both topics that will inevitably come back from the dead when Persona 4 Revival drops. Although these topics are interesting and I've covered them in depth in previous videos, I think a lot of people are missing the forest for the trees with them. One of the major recurring themes throughout Persona 4 is the nature of society. It's the culture born from it, the importance of community, the ability to assimilate within it, and the broader function of society. And all these facets are dialed up to 10 in Japanese society. Kanji, like so many of us, have failed to assimilate to this culture. Finding things compelling he shouldn't as a man and his inability to express himself is why he rejected it. Rejecting this culture prevented him from acknowledging certain emotions and diluted his sense of self. Thanks to bullying, he, unironically, parodies his interpretation of a dude in society. The facade he created was what he believed is truth, even though he was actively running away from it. And this is something that we've all probably done at some point in our lives. Have you ever been bullied for liking something or acted like you didn't just to fit in? If you have, a part of you assimilated there and then. Everyone wears masks to blend in, but the more time we spend behind these masks, the more our sense of self begins to erode. Everyone talks about how important it is to express ourselves and be who we are, but what happens when you're not accepted for those things? Should you change to have friends and blend into society, or should you remain steadfast in your beliefs and persevere to be yourself? Furthermore, is it worth potentially losing yourself assimilating to a culture that isn't even virtuous? The term virtuous is defined as someone with morally correct behavior. If society consists of people and people aren't virtuous, do we have the moral authority to pass judgment or correct those to better align with our flawed values? This is obviously a philosophical question, but it's also one of the recurring questions P4 challenges its players with. We're obviously provided with an answer here, but this moral quagmire is one of the many reasons why Kanji is such a thought-provoking character. He finds himself at a crossroad after being bullied for his interests. Continue being yourself and let your truth be rejected, or become a hot-headed biker that's socially accepted yet still be rejected by society. Both socially manufactured outcomes led to the same place, and I'm not sure how comfortable I feel contributing to this. For these reasons, I sincerely believe Kanji may be one of the most thought-provoking characters in fiction. His struggle is believable, his behavior is reasonable, and what he says about us is psychologically horrifying. The implications the writers have about society are quite dark with him. Believe it or not, many of the themes tackled with Kanji serve as basic foreshadowing. These themes will be revisited later with additional context. I just wanted to highlight how brilliant this foreshadowing is here with him. The diluted sense of self theme is tackled throughout the cast, but what happens when that sense of self takes on a life of its own? What happens when you're so engrossed in your facade that you forget you're even wearing a mask? Well, you get Rise. Rise was an idol who retired and returned to Inaba. She's actually one of the first characters we see in the game. After returning home, she helps her grandma at the tofu shop before being captured. Her shadow reveals that a part of her yearns to be sexualized, enjoys the attention, and doesn't like the old Rise. Whereas Kanji understood he was putting on a facade, Rise's sense of self began to erode entirely. Her reset persona was rewarded and thus psychologically reinforced. Everyone's excited to meet the idol Reset, the bubbly outgoing person. Yet, that person isn't Rise. Rise realized that she wasn't a fan of the person she was becoming and decided to leave the industry because of it. Because she was bullied as a kid and everyone adored Reset, she wasn't sure if anyone would accept Rise as she is. When we first meet her, she greets us with a monotone voice. She isn't bubbly, trying to entertain anybody, or trying to be something that she's not. She's just Rise and figuring out what that means to her. Being a famous pop idol is something most of us will never relate to, but I think we've all worn masks we sometimes forget to take off. If you ever brought who you are at work home or explained something work related to someone who didn't care, you can relate to Rise. It's like when you're trying to blend in and forget that you don't always have to. Spending too much time as someone else will inevitably blend into your life. I also adore how subdued Rise's writing is. Even though her sexuality is on full display and she constantly flirts with the main character, her themes and internal struggles are mostly written with grace. Her outward flirtatious nature is juxtaposed with someone facing an identity crisis. She's constantly questioning whether she enjoys who she is and sometimes even what she is. She has to be constantly reminded that it's okay to leave Reset behind and that being Reset is a-okay. She's written for players to ponder just how deeply rooted her identity crisis is. If Kanji is someone who was ostracized for running away from himself, Rise is someone who ran away from herself and was rewarded because of it. She's someone who was assimilated but wasn't ultimately happy. Rise and Kanji almost have this like ghetto yin and yang thing going on. They've both assimilated with the different results and concluded they were both happy as they were before. Like Kanji, there's a plethora of ways to look at Rise. Similar to the rest of the cast, her story reinforces the themes of truth and acceptance, but I think her character is really fascinating as well. Also, another huge bias I have with Rise is how much she reminds me of Mima from Perfect Blue. I won't say too much about Mima other than if you know, you know. And if you haven't seen Perfect Blue, it's absolutely sublime, which is the opposite of how I feel about Teddy. Okay, listen, I don't hate Teddy, but he's a pretty divisive character, all things considered. I have a love-hate relationship with this creature. Teddy is a shadow born from the TV world who helps the detective team. He's a bumbling goofball who makes awful bear jokes and questions his purpose as you approach Rise's dungeon. And yes, you heard that right. As someone who's written about existentialism on this channel, it probably goes without saying that I find it fascinating as a concept. It's fascinating as a culture, way of understanding, perception of the world, how it impacts your worldview, and making sense of things we don't know about. However, all of this is juxtaposed with how overtly flirtatious his advances are. Sure, he's a playful person, but the constant flirting and comedic relief makes his questions feel contrived. Then again, maybe that's the point. Whether you enjoy this character is contingent upon your belief in him. If you can tolerate the constant jokes and his behavior for a character that tackles existence, you'll have a good time with him. Nevertheless, you're going to have people like me who just have a hard time buying into this character. People grappling with concepts like free will, purpose, and existence usually wear them on their sleeves. On the flip side, some of the happiest people in the world are the most depressed. Robert Williams was the voice of many childhoods and made millions laugh for decades before tragically taking his own life. Unfortunately, some of the most lighthearted and funny people are silently struggling or facing battles within themselves. Do I think Teddy is one of these people? No, no I don't. His character never felt real, genuine, or as vulnerable as the rest of the cast. He really sticks out when you start to think about the others' characterizations. Teddy evolves from skeptical of you and your friends causing the murders to comfortable and joking after proving your innocence. If Hoshino and Tanaka wanted to tackle existence with Teddy, I think preserving his original character would have made more sense. Imagine a Teddy who was skeptical of all these strangers, gradually built trust with them, realized his actions may be futile, explored it with the cast, learned the importance of forming bonds with others, and then became Teddy. Then again, Teddy has his fans, and it's cool if you're one of them. I know he's a divisive character, but he felt like missed potential to me. He's definitely the most problematic of the main cast. Tanaka and the team would thankfully bounce back with a final detective member, Naoto Shirogane. Naoto is a mysterious detective who gets involved when Kanji's kidnapped. The team trails her and Kanji speaking about the disappearances while expressing concern for his life. Briefly after Maruka's death, she confronts the team, says it's strange she never appeared on the Midnight Channel, and said she'd keep an eye on them. And yes, I'm using she because I don't know a single person who was surprised by the big reveal. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you were though. The detective team thought it was case closed after capturing Mitsuo. They thought things were back to normal and resumed their lives until September hit. And everyone on the police force thought the same except for Naoto. Naoto believed there were some inconsistencies with Mitsuo's story and just had a hunch. Because of this and some family issues, she enrolls in Yasagami for the time. Eventually she appears on the Midnight Channel, and you know how this goes by now. Naoto comes from a family of prestigious detectives. Both her parents and grandfather who raised her after her parents died were all detectives. She struggled to make friends as a kid and got lost in detective novels. She fell in love with detective work, piecing together mysteries, and loved everything about these books until she came to a grim realization. The detectives she idealized in her novels were all males. Acknowledging this, and the fact that most investigators are male, she concealed her sex, put her head down, and got to work. She frowns upon her age as well. She desperately wants to be an adult so people will stop treating her like a child. Like Kanji, Naoto's perceived identity and worldview were largely informed by society. Detective books, her family, and other detective media she consumed informed her of what a detective was. She spent her life aligning with these doctrines as a form of escape, which comes to a head in her dungeon. Unlike the rest of the cast, we've seen Naoto throughout the game lying to herself. She's rude to the detective team, is very assertive with everyone, struggles to interact with people her age, and is sometimes patronized by the police for her age. Seeing this occur for several months and then listening to her speak with her shadow is heartbreaking. In her dungeon, she finally drops the facade and we see who Naoto actually is, someone who's vulnerable and terrified to be herself. And because she struggled to make friends and has treated herself like an adult for years, she's never been emotionally vulnerable with anyone. Having space to speak with a group or even just a person can reinforce who you are or implore you to consider things you haven't. Hearing someone else say, "I'm with you, talk to me whenever," or something as simple as "I've been there" can fundamentally change how you approach your problems. Knowing that others can sympathize and empathize with your struggles is incredibly human. With that said, society's rules have undoubtedly caused a lot of harm to her identity. Many of Naoto and Kanji's struggles are rooted in gender roles perpetuated by society. Even if you don't support these ideals, we're all part of a society that does. These roles and culture disproportionately impact everyone. Interests, careers, the way we dress, the way we walk and talk are often labeled. Exhibiting traits from the opposite sex usually prompts someone to bully you. Bullying functions as a form of corrective behavior, and mimicking traits from others we admire further reinforces this culture. These are actions we subconsciously do because we're social creatures. As people, we yearn to be accepted, have friends, and be part of a community, and removing ourselves from socializing because of the way we express ourselves is detrimental to society's well-being. And when we bring this back to Kanji and Naoto, they wear masks to be socially accepted. And as we learned from Rise, the pillars of who we are erode the more time we spend behind them. Before moving on to the themes, I want to take a step back and reiterate just how brilliant the cast is. Each of them, even Teddy, has so much depth and nuance, but they never feel like caricatures either. Caricatures in Megaten are hard to avoid due to the endings and just the nature of Megaten. And as much as I love Strange Journey's cast and how each representative reached their respective worldview, they're all ultimately caricatures. In Persona 4, each character has their own unique personalities, comfort each other, joke about things, and disagree when they need to. Each of them have their own arcs and trauma they're learning to live with. There's just something so beautiful about a group of flawed people getting together and trying their best every day. It's really inspiring and nothing short of brilliant. It also takes a lot of courage to tackle some of these themes back in 2008, especially in Japan. While some of P4's subject matter is more socially accepted now in 2026, it was very different 2 decades ago. Things were a bit more rough, less inclusive, and far more direct for better or for worse. When considering the time and how collective Japanese culture is, the depth and nuance Persona 4 has is beyond impressive. Tackling themes like sexuality, social norms, gender politics, the role of society, and the dangers of our biases was incredibly rare at the time. And if you don't like these interpretations, there's a plethora of angles that you could approach the cast with. You could love the dynamic that they have with each other, appreciate just how much the entire cast understands each other, love the family dynamic that they have, just enjoy the cast for who they are, or you just enjoy the ride. 20 years later, the community is still making videos on characters and discussing the broader themes of the narrative. Fan discussion and content around this game is a testament to its quality in writing. I really don't think Yuichiro Tanaka, Akira Kawasaki, and Hashino get enough credit with this pivot either. If you've only played the Persona games, you probably won't understand this, but the tonal pivot from Nocturne to Persona 3 to Persona 4, even though it's flawed, is pretty good. Sure, some scenes are a little goofy at times and over the top, but Shin Megami Tensei is a series that takes itself seriously with dark themes. Although Persona 4 has some darker themes that we're about to discuss, the murder mystery story, the upbeat soundtrack, the nostalgic setting of Inaba, and how relatable the cast is elicits a far lighter tone than the mainline Megaten series. Compare any of P4 dungeons with any of the sectors from Strange Journey and the difference is night and day, even from Persona 3, which, especially if you played Fez, is a much tonally darker game than Persona 4 Golden. Now, just to reiterate, I don't think the team gets enough credit for how well they pivoted away from the mainline series' oppressive tone. It's not perfect as we've discussed throughout this video, but it certainly helped further separate Hashino's Persona games from the mainline Shin Megami Tensei game. With that said, even if we're talking about Persona, it's still Megaten, meaning darker stories and themes are still on the table. The major recurring theme found throughout the cast, music, narrative, and vanilla Persona 4's animated opening is identity and self. I've spoken about this at length already, so I won't belabor the point here. This game is largely about confronting our insecurities and learning to accept them, and this is a message that should be relatable to everyone. Whether you're making friends at a new school, trying to fit into a new work culture, or trying to build a new community, we all just want to be accepted. The problem with acceptance is you're often forced to align yourself with different morals and values. This isn't an inherently bad thing, but I'm also not arrogant enough to assume that my ethics are superior to anybody else's. Moral authority is intrinsically paradoxical. Yet, this is what occurs when you're assimilating towards the dominant culture. As we become adults, we become more grounded, lose our sense of hope, and our whimsical natures are replaced by something more stoic. We're scared to be vulnerable, show our true emotions, and hide behind a facade as a result. And Persona 4 stands in opposition of this lifestyle. Persona 4 advocates the importance of identity, expression, and a unique perspective. Spending too much time behind this facade erodes what makes everyone special. Different cultures, ways of life, or even perspectives on things should be celebrated. No matter how hard it is to find, there's always going to be a community out there that embraces you for who you are. Not only do communities function as a space for us to be socialized and make friends, but they're also an environment for us to learn more about ourselves. Building a bond with someone, disagreeing with them on something, and the propensity for discussion is a privilege that we shouldn't take for granted. Scenarios like these allow us to empathize, see things from different perspectives, inform others, and most importantly, learn more about ourselves. And unpacking why we're emotionally tethered to certain beliefs is difficult when you're isolated. Psychological reinforcement and punishment are hard to experience when we're alone. For better or for worse, this is one of the many reasons why friends are so important when you grow up. Nevertheless, I'd like to revisit something I said earlier. Moral authority is intrinsically paradoxical. Under our current system, flawed individuals judge other flawed individuals. What makes a culture superior? Do we have the right to assimilate others into it? And what makes my interpretation of truth more valid than yours? These are some of the questions that society has answered, whether we're happy about it or not. Social rules informing our behavior is a constant, but the degree it impacts us varies based on country. Collectivism is so ingrained in Japanese culture that it literally bleeds into Japanese. As you're all probably aware, Japan is famous for how accommodating and kind people are. However, what if I told you that some of that was a facade? Whether you're in Japan speaking Japanese, it's important to be aware of hone and tatamai. Hone translates to true sound, and tatamai translates into facade or public front. Due to their history and culture, many Japanese rarely say no, even if they don't want to do something. The reason behind this is to protect others' emotions and preserve everyone's well-being. As such, hone refers to the speaker's true feelings, and tatamai is what they're saying out of their mouths. Sustaining the well-being of the collective is far more important than your individual feelings. Preserving harmony and not being selfish are at the center of this cultural belief. And while this may sound novel, reality is far grayer. Collectivism's order and balance are delivered through forfeiting individual well-being. The group's well-being is more important than yours, and preserving this will always be of the utmost importance. As such, and yes, this is the logical extreme, you're almost expected to suffer in silence. And while it may sound like I'm criticizing collectivism to promote individualism, the grass isn't greener here. In the Western world, we value individual freedom above all. Over here, we promote creativity, individual thought, pursuing your dreams, and preaching the importance of expression and camaraderie. All this occurs as we bicker over ideological differences and assimilate to systems that are antithetical to what we preach. We're raised to look out for each other until you're trying out for a team, applying for a school, or competing with others for a job. Finite resources and our inherently selfish natures position us at odds with social equity. As long as we make the team, get into that program, or get the job that we want, we're fine, and that's all that matters. At best, individualism contributes towards altruistic behavior, and at worst, we're incredibly selfish creatures. What I'm getting at is that there's trade-offs to both philosophies. Neither side is morally right, and I'm not interested in advocating for either of them. You have to adjust if you want to survive. And because society is built from the culture of those residing in it, is adjusting to it ethically the right thing to do? Is it morally right to promote togetherness as you try to get ahead of everyone? Is everyone's well-being more important than your personal well-being? Society, rules, and the culture that bound us to one another is hypocritical, and our behavior perpetuates this. Cultural assimilation means the delusion of self, or in Persona 4's terms, the loss of truth. Many of us go our entire lives without realizing how influential society is in crafting us. The way we speak, decisions we make, how we handle relationships, our pursuit of work, and the way we carry ourselves can all be traced back to community. And the individuals who reject the status quo are branded as villains in Persona 4. Although we can see this through most of them, nobody embodies this better than Toru Adachi. Adachi's been praised for almost 20 years now, so I don't think I need to be very persuasive here. Ironically enough, who he is stresses the importance of society despite his reservations with it. He's the antithesis of everything the game preaches. Long story short, Adachi was raised in a strict household. His parents forced him to prioritize studying, get good grades, getting into a prestigious school, and finding a good job rather than making friends or learning about himself. He was sent to Inaba as punishment for a mistake he made at work. As a fun cultural fact, relocating a problematic employee or providing them with a mundane work are how employers get employees to quit, since firing employees in Japan is frowned upon. Adachi's rigorous upbringing prevented him from making friends. He spent his entire life isolated following his parents' directions. Whether he realized it at the time, he was detached from society and robbed of being socialized. Exclusion bred loneliness, loneliness manifested into resentment, and resentment evolved into animosity. This involuntary social isolation turned him into a psychopath who vehemently rejects society. He has this superiority complex, he doesn't value others' lives, and believes the world owes him something. He's steadfast in his beliefs and refuses to conform to rules rooted in hypocrisy. He'd rather indulge in his own world than become what he believes ruined his life. The best written antagonists are characters that make you think. As much as I love the mustache-twirling villains of Persona 5, an antagonist that makes you, even for a second, question your moral compass or have a small degree of sympathy over will last with you a lifetime. Although just a psychopath, words can't describe how brilliantly he fits the narrative and explores Persona 4's broader themes. Adachi's presence is so commanding because of how grounded it is. He's taken to a logical extreme, sure, but you can't say his views on people are entirely off base either. Hell, most of the cast's insecurities and shadows were born from our shortcomings. Whether you're expected to follow in your family's footsteps, struggling with your identity because of your interest, or find yourself insecure about your sex in a male-dominated field, many of these biases and culture are born and perpetuated through us. If you let it resonate, his worldview really hits close to home. It makes you look around and start questioning things you may have never thought about. Behind his words are insidious truths that we shouldn't ignore. And yet, what's far more disturbing is the role that we've all played in creating Adachi. None of us are directly responsible for him, and he has his own autonomy, but so long as we perpetuate and exist within these rules, we are sort of responsible for him. It's like being anti-sweatshop and buying an Apple or Nike product. You may detest sweatshops and advocate for living wages around the world, but each dollar, euro, yen, or sterling spent empowers these companies. This hypocrisy, amongst many others, is hard to ignore once you're aware of them. And once you acknowledge these things, it's hard to ignore, which makes Adachi's character so uncomfortable. And turning his back on society and embracing solitude, he's become everything he's hated. While Adachi's thoughts on society are justified to an extent, he's never tried to embrace it either. The two recurring themes echoed throughout the narrative are the beauty in community and the importance of truth and acceptance. Although many social issues stem from us, it's important to have some faith in people. The detective team provides a community for everyone. They're able to bounce ideas off of each other, lean on one another when they're going through things, honestly discuss mistakes they've made, and grow together. Friendships and camaraderie are many things, but they're a space to be completely vulnerable. Knowing that someone else has your best interest in mind and respects you as a person is something that shouldn't be taken for granted. It may be painful at times, you may even get hurt along the way, and you may even change as a person, but you shouldn't stop trying to build or participate in that community. Community is the reason Inaba feels like home. Community is the reason why you and I are here. Community is where we grow as people, and community is where you can learn the most about yourself. Refusing to build a community or participate in society will be detrimental to you in the long run. Losing everything we've discussed can fundamentally change you for the worse. We're social creatures at the end of the day, and we yearn to be part of something even if the group's behaviors might be self-destructive. Community and the people we choose to surround ourselves with say more about us than we can describe. And in the case of Persona 4, the people Yu surrounds himself with highlights the relevance of community. Beyond the Adachi and Yu will have the same persona thing, they're effectively opposites. Yu was sent to Inaba and got to know Nanako and Dojima alongside the detective team. When he gained the power to summon personas and enter the TV world, he decided to use his powers to save everyone. As a blank canvas designed to roleplay with, Yu has an enormously big heart and he cares for everyone around him on top of being a Giga Chad. Regardless of how you respond to people or choose to express him, he's a selfless guy who understands people and embraces truth. The fact he's the only party member who doesn't have a shadow speaks for itself. Adachi, conversely, is envious of those with talent, refers to his coworkers as idiots, shows no remorse for others' feelings, and doesn't understand the value of them. The closest thing he has to a friend was Ryotaro and the elderly woman in Junes. He sincerely values both of them even if he doesn't care to admit it. Ryotaro may have been the first person who invited him into his home and showed him kindness outside of work. And whether he cares to admit it, he enjoyed the elderly woman looking out for him as she provided a sense of belonging he most likely never experienced. As a reminder, Adachi is between 27 and 28 during the events of Persona 4. He's at or approaching the age where you start to get stuck in your own ways. He's experienced his entire life feeling this animosity towards people and living behind the facade. Maybe he could have changed if he met Ryotaro or this older woman earlier. but he's beyond the point of return, unfortunately. His tenacious belief in doing nothing wrong is exactly why Ameno Sagiri chose Adachi as a vessel. Ameno Sagiri echoes many of Adachi's frustrations. He describes himself as the amalgamation of humanity. They created the Midnight Channel, the Fog, and Shadows as an escape for people. They claim people are inherently biased, pursuing a truth that aligns with their worldviews. Many of us are incapable of objectivity and prefer to live in a world that makes sense to us than reality. And there's a ton of, no pun intended, truth to what he's saying, demonstrated by the Fog and TV world. As we've discussed throughout this entire video, Persona 4 defines truth as reality. Not metaphysical reality, but reality. Chie being envious of Yukiko, Nanako missing her mother, and Rise struggling with her identity is how Persona 4 defines truth. Shadows taking form as repressed truths, the fog being symbolic of our inability to grasp it, and our willingness to embrace it demonstrates the fluid nature of reality. Our worldviews are built through experiences and life lessons. Whether you burn your hand, find yourself ostracized, bullied for something, or have some behavior positively reinforced, these experiences are memorialized as memories. Because our worldviews are shaped through experiences we remember, our memories in many ways serve as our logical scaffolding. We rely heavily on our memories to draw conclusions or make sense of things we haven't encountered. If we accept this as our premise, it introduces some interesting questions about P4's interpretation of truth. Are our memories a reliable way to engage with the world? What happens if we deny them? And what happens if we reject our experiences? If you join my streams or you've been around the channel for a while, you'll know that I love comic books. And this line of thinking reminded me of some dialogue from Batman the Killing Joke. If you haven't read this comic, it's less than 80 pages and is well worth your time. The story is centered around the Joker escaping Arkham Asylum and trying to drive Commissioner Gordon and Batman mad. It also explores the Joker's origins and how one bad day is what broke him. There are many great moments in this story, but the scene after capturing Gordon has stuck with me throughout the years. Gordon wakes up and thinks he's in a nightmare until the Joker tells him he's going mad. Gordon tells him he remembers before the Joker cautions against this. After telling Gordon how dangerous remembering things and memories are, he says, "But can we live without them? Memories are what our reason is based upon. If we can't face them, we deny reason itself." And as much as he is a psychopath, there's some truth to what he's saying here. By saying this, the Joker implores Gordon to pursue madness instead of confronting a reality where his worldview is questioned. This one page explores the Joker's psychology and, most importantly, demonstrates how rejecting truth changes your perception of the world. His perception of reality was built through accepting and rejecting truths. He believes he exists in a reality that makes sense. And this worldview makes sense until Batman tells him that Gordon is okay and that maybe regular people don't crack under pressure. Like Adachi, the Joker, and you and I, we incorporate life experiences into our perceptions of the world. This can be seen through the detective team's initial rejection of their shadows, Adachi being Adachi, and the Joker realizing his worldview might be problematic. Nevertheless, the real problem with everyone accepting reality on their own terms is how much it divides us. As much as P4 advocates for community, surrounding yourself exclusively with that community may lead to a confirmation bias. We're naturally drawn to like-minded individuals as humans. It's not a coincidence that many people marry others within their socioeconomic bracket, search for similar traits within friends, and so on. And since we live in the 21st century, this has been taken to the extreme with demographics, segmentation, and algorithms. Algorithms are basically just retention tools that leverage our data. The reason you found this video, for example, is because you probably enjoy Persona 3, 4, or 5. You've probably seen other Persona 4 videos, may watch other Atlus creators, you may enjoy video essays on retro games, or for some other reason. While YouTube and other social media algorithms are mostly harmless, all this personal data that's harvested has been used to separate us as well. This is especially relevant when it comes to politics. Each party understands what their voters want and provides them with it. And if you ever wonder why people can't argue anymore, this is largely why. Beyond politics, we're constantly surrounded by so much confirmation bias that we refuse to engage with others with different perspectives. Rather than understanding and listening, we default to name-calling or blocking them to preserve our worldview. In 2026 especially, we're so willing to believe what we want that we often have a hard time accepting reality. So many of us today are hard-headed or incapable of respectful discussion that sometimes Persona 4 hits too close to home. Hell, look at how fast everyone is to label Mitsuo and Namatame as the killer. It's something the police, townsfolk, and members of the detective team believed. Persona 4, above all, challenges us to accept truth regardless of how bleak it is. The onus is on us to endeavor towards acceptance. If we want to grow and move forward as people, we must embrace reality and discover ourselves through embracing one another. And much like Golden forced another semester into the game, let's talk about Marie in the new content. I'd love to call Marie a divisive character, but it's Marie. I don't know anyone who actually likes her. I think she's okay, I'm just not sold on her inclusion, and it's hard to stand beside one of the best casts in gaming. If you're not fun to be around and or fail to reach the emotional depth of the cast, you're going to stand out. If anything, Marie and the golden content are a symptom of a much larger problem Sega has recently acknowledged. Marie is this mysterious girl with amnesia. She doesn't remember anything about herself or the past. The only thing she has is a bamboo comb. Her social link finds you trying to learn more about Marie's past as you run into your friends. Through seeing you interact with his friends and asking questions, Marie learns the importance of forging bonds with others. The most infamous part of Marie are her personality and poems. Whether you're reading her poems or she gets flustered, she'll get mad and start name calling. If she communicates through yelling, then I guess these poems aren't that bad. Maybe she writes these poems because she's scared to express herself, but even after her character arc is finished, I never had that "oh, that makes sense" moment. The emotion I was left with was disappointment, or in the words of my favorite food reviewer, my disappointment is immeasurable and my day is ruined. Now that I'm thinking about it, completing her social link is really just a means to an end, isn't it? I'm willing to bet that people stomached Marie and her dungeon to spend more time with the cast, and who can blame them? Marie's dungeon carries the same quality as the rest of Persona 4's dungeons. Mediocre. Visually, her dungeon is cool. It feels like we're exploring her memories with a soothing soundtrack. As you're exploring and fighting shadows, you'll quickly realize that your SP is quickly diminishing. Yes, each battle reduces your SP by half. You'll also realize that all your gear and equipment that you've spent the past 60 plus hours working for is gone. You'll find accessories in the dungeon that restores your SP. I imagine everyone probably had the same experience I had. Finish the first fight, go what the fuck, I found some accessories and cruise through the rest of the dungeon. Hashino and the team had the opportunity to make a better dungeon and made a dungeon centered around ignoring the main gimmick. No matter how hard I think about it, I don't understand why you designed a dungeon around resource scarcity only for players to easily ignore it. Then again, that about sums up Persona 4's dungeons and combat, so good on them for doubling down, I guess. As the team reaches the end of the dungeon, Marie explains how she was born to watch humans and absorb all the fog following Amenosigiri's defeat. After spending time with humans and learning the value of them, she decides to absorb the fog and kill herself to prevent it from spreading. Marie's character arc is unironically hilarious. You can tell by the detective team's reaction that the writers thought that we would all love Marie like the rest of them. This is supposed to be an emotionally charged moment. Spending time with humans turned Marie into a selfless person who's willing to risk her own life for them. This narrative arc really could have worked if she was more likable, but most of the community seems apathetic or just doesn't enjoy her, making this emotional conclusion to her story unironically hilarious because of how flat it falls. Can you imagine if someone on the detective team wanted to do this instead? It would have been devastating, unless it was Teddy, of course. Yet, the character they wrote to do this is someone who is incredibly divisive. Now, it's important to mention this criticism is easy to make since the game is almost 20 years old as of writing. When Hashino, Tanaka, and the team were writing Marie, they certainly envisioned this character would be beloved, especially given the community reception to the detective team. They were probably excited for this narrative conclusion, so I can't entirely blame them for betting so hard on Marie. And even when you remove everyone's feelings about her and her arc, the entire third semester feels contrived at best. Because this video is already long enough and I have a lot to say about this next topic, I'm planning to make a separate discussion video about it, so make sure that you're subscribed if you're interested. Imagine spending several months or years developing and writing a story. You finish the story, release it, it's universally beloved, and someone tells you to just add more to it. Adding more story to your story risks destroying your pacing, forces writers to work within the original's framework, and risks changing the overall resolution. I know most of us think it's just adding to the story, but it's a bit more nuanced than that. You need to consider the pacing, the themes, characterization, and preserving the original plot's continuity amongst many other things when making changes. Persona 3 and SMT5 Vengeance outright avoid these issues by adding brand new campaigns, while Persona 4 Golden, 5 Royal, and SMT Strange Journey Redux integrate new arcs into the plot with mixed reception. Atlus's games are written to completion, so whenever I finish an Atlus game, I'm rarely thinking to myself, oh yeah, it could have been better with X, Y, or Z. Narratively, they're complete succinct experiences. Finishing Persona 4 the first time, I never thought to myself, man, this game could have used another semester. As such, it's hard to view the semester along with the other content as anything other than tacked on. Both the gameplay and narrative suffer from Golden's inclusion overall. Sure, some of the new scenes were cool, I'll never complain about more Persona music, and I love some of the new content like social links and expanded Inaba, and obviously hanging out with the detective team is fun, but I can easily live without the combat changes, Marie, and her contrived narrative arc because vanilla Persona 4 was already a classic to begin with. Also, like, barely anything happens in January, but I think you get the point by now. I'm curious how everyone feels about Marie, the new semester, and the Golden content. Am I being too critical here? Do you think it fits the original narrative? Do you think Marie was well integrate it into the plot? Am I just bitching? And do you think Atlus will address more of these issues in Persona 4 Revival? If you'd like to know my full thoughts on remakes, game preservation, and the current trajectory of the AAA games industry, please check out my This Trend is Destroying the Industry video. In short, remasters are good for preservation, remakes should be made sparingly, remakes aren't preservation, and a potential brand new game dies each time you ask for a remake. And this pretty much sums up how I feel about Persona 4 Revival. With exception to the graphics, which are dated by today's standards, Persona 4 doesn't need to be modernized, but that certainly won't stop Atlus from fixing what isn't broken. Aside from Persona 3 being my favorite Hoshino Persona title, it was a much better candidate for a remake because there wasn't and still isn't a definitive version of that game. Fez, Portable, and now Reload each have their own merits. Persona 4 comparatively has a definitive edition called Persona 4 Golden, which is beloved by the community. Sure, there's some issues with Golden like the tone and the combat and all that other stuff, but it's mostly a solid version. And remastering Golden, in my opinion, was more than enough for the community. Since Revival is inevitable and we're going to hear more about it very soon, I imagine they're going to replicate what they did with Reload and integrate a similar art direction and mechanics from Persona 5. Outside of a rewind feature that sends you back a week in the game and adding new gimmicks to the dungeons, I just wouldn't touch anything. I also made a reaction video with my thoughts about Revival's Xbox Game Showcase trailer if you're interested in that. Anyways, don't touch the 3-hour opening, don't touch the plot, and do not under any circumstances touch the characters unless it's Teddy or Marie. As we bring this video to a close, I want to make something abundantly clear. Even though I was critical of Persona 4 in this video, I love Persona 4. Persona 4 is a game that means a lot to a lot of people. Before Persona 5 released and blew up the franchise, Persona 4 was right behind it back in the day. Spawning several spin-offs, an anime adaptation, a manga series, and much more, it's important to remember just how big this game was and the legacy it has on the modern franchise. While the opening is long and the gameplay is rough, I can't deny the brilliance of the plot, characters, and themes. The cast alone will continue to stand the test of time. They're practically begging for a new generation to fall in love with them with Revival on the horizon. The discussion about truth, society, assimilation, collectivism, and confirmation bias feel more relevant in 2026 than when it was released 2 decades ago as of writing this, and the story and cast will probably resonate with you. You might be nostalgic of Inaba, remember stupid shit you did with your friends, the importance of being true to yourself, or haunted by how relevant the narrative and themes are today. Is Persona 4 my favorite Atlus game? Not even kind of. Is Persona 4 my favorite Persona game? No. And should some random dude's opinion you'll probably never watch content from again change your mind if it is? Not even a little bit. At the end of the day, Persona 4 is a very, very special game that, as we've discussed throughout this entire video, is cherished in the hearts of millions. Just because I prefer the mainline series, Persona 3, Strange Journey, Nocturne, and other Atlus titles doesn't take away from how important this game is to Atlus and the community. It's just one of those games that'll stick with you. Despite all my criticisms, I'm not afraid to admit that I cried watching the end of this game. Shit, I'm tearing up thinking about it and writing about it now. If you grow to love these characters, this ending will hit you hard. At the end of the day, Persona 4 is a magical experience, and I hope Revival does the same for the next generation as it did for mine. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. I know this is a long one, and I know that this video has been long overdue, so I am so happy to finally have it done, delete all this footage, get this video out. I gotta finally stop talking about it, and yeah, things are good. So before we get into the outro, first and foremost, shout out to all the domain dwellers for supporting my creative endeavors. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting my efforts by becoming a channel member or subscribing on Twitch, where you'll receive early video access, a special Discord role, access to my scripts, outlines, emotes, and even more. Also, feel free to join the Discord where we talk about everything from games to TV, music, anime, pretty much anything. Shoot the shit about the industry, it's all there. Also, you can catch me live here or on Twitch where I stream, and if you want to catch all of the old stream VODs, you can find them in the past live streams playlist. I unlist them so I don't bother everybody and just, flood your sub boxes because that shit sucks. Anyways, I'm going to work on some smaller videos now that I've been wanting to make for a while, and I think I finally figured out some stability in my life and figured out a good way to get content out as well as get to be where I want to, be in my life and such. But anyways, I think the next big video that I want to work on is Persona 5. As you could probably tell from this Persona 4 video, I'm going to have a rather unique perspective on Persona 5. I've talked about it a bit on stream, so you guys probably already know my thoughts on P5, but yeah, it's weird, right? Like I played P5 before getting super into Megaton, then I played Megaton, and then going back to it was a different experience. So I want to make sure that I captured the excitement that I had for P5, because at the end of the day, P5 is a large reason why this channel exists. Even 10 years ago, back when I played the game, I just started writing down my thoughts, and I just never, well, had a mic or a platform to talk about them with. So I think it'll be fun to talk about one day. I already have the playthrough done and recorded. If you watch the streams, you already know that. So anyways, before we get out of here, a few quick questions for you guys. So which Persona game is your favorite? Are you excited for a revival? What would you like changed? Who's your favorite detective team member? And what do you think of Golden? Is Persona 4 your favorite? Did Persona 4 change your life like 3 did for me? And how did you get into Persona, SMT, and JRPGs? I'd love to keep the conversation going with you guys in the comments. And again, I am just happy that this video is done. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Once again, thanks for watching. Feel free to join the Discord if you want to talk. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. That helps me a ton. And I'll check in with you guys in the next one, or I'll see you guys on stream. Have a good one.